Good morning. To President Gallo, Provost Walton, members of the President's Cabinet, to the SGA President, Mr. Brooks, and other members of the Student Government Association, to Ms. Grambling, Ms. Coates, and her royal court, other officers, faculty, staff, and students. Welcome to our Constitution Day observance at Grambling State University. Today, we take a moment to discuss the role, the importance, and the impact of a document that is over 200 years old. To what document am I referring? None other than the U.S. Constitution. This document affects all of our lives, and today we will open the floor to an intellectual dialogue and discussion about the impact of this document. Today's theme, I Am an American, a conversation about the U.S. Constitution. Now, one request that I have, please place your cell phones and all other electronic devices on silent, please. This is to avoid any disturbances to our program. Yeah, you should have a program. It will proceed as printed, starting with greetings by President Richard Gallo, followed by SGA President Mr. Jaquel Brooks.
Thank you, Dr. Belton Cardozo. Good morning, and welcome to the 2022 Constitution Day Observance Program here at Grambling State University. Today, we are joined by a distinguished panel of experts who will engage us in a conversation about the U.S. Constitution. For more than 2 centuries, men and women have struggled and strived to make good on the promise of our founding document and to expand its promise in accordance with growth and progress as a nation. Here at Grambling State University, we recognize the principles of the Constitution are as relevant today as ever. Across the country, we are met with grave attempts to suppress and subvert the right to vote in free and fair elections, the most sacred right in our democracy and at the very heart of our Constitution. It is with this that I encourage you not only to register to vote, I'll say it again, it is with this that I encourage you to not only register to vote, but weigh in on issues that matter to you, and most importantly, exercise your right to vote in every election. That bears repeating. Exercise your right to vote in every election. Constitution Day, as well as every other day, should remind us of our shared responsibility to leave our community, our society, and our country in better shape for future generations. We appreciate all in attendance and those involved in planning this important observance, including Dr. Rory Bedford, Director of Office of Continuing Education and Service Learning, Dr. Helen Smiley, Dean of the Earl Lester Cole Honors College, as well as the program participants and panelists. Let us continue to do our part to ensure justice for all, liberty for all, and equality for all. Thank you, and enjoy the program.
Good morning. The U.S. Constitution has been referred to as our most remarkable political charter in history. Along with its later affixed Bill of Rights, the Constitution defines the structure of our federal government and serves as the legal means for the protection of our rights. Today, we celebrate the signing of the U.S. Constitution, which occurred on September 17, 1787. Our theme this year is I Am an American, a conversation about the U.S. Constitution. Signifies the importance of each American citizen's rights and protection granted under the federal law, regardless of race. I encourage you to listen well and learn from our panel of experts as our fellow students engage them in this important conversation. As the president of the Student Government Association and a member of the Earl Lester Cole Honors College, I welcome you to our annual observance.
morning, everyone. I am Kelly Copes, a senior biology major hailing from the city that bleeds black and gold, Grambling, Louisiana, and I graciously serve as the 69th Miss Grambling State University. On September 17, 1787, a majority of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention approved the document that they had drafted and revised since May. After a farewell banquet, delegates went home to organize support for or against the proposed charter. The Constitution had to be scrutinized and debated by the public before it would become the law of the land. The document was laid before the United States Congress, assembled on September 20th. For 2 days, September 26th and 27th, Congress debated whether to censure the delegates to the Constitutional Convention for exceeding their authority by creating a new form of government instead of simply revising the Articles of Confederation. They decided to drop the matter, and because of their actions, today we celebrate a moment in history that affects us all, the ratification of the Constitution. In May 2005, the United States Department of Education demonstrated its support of the law by announcing that the law would apply to any school receiving federal funds of any kind. Therefore, the head of every federal agency should provide each employee with educational materials concerning the Constitution, and each educational institution that receives federal funds should hold a program for students. The observance is normally hosted on September 17th. However, Grambling State University's observance is in keeping with the university-approved convocation schedule. I hope you enjoyed this panel discussion as our experts impart knowledge about the United States Constitution. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm excited to introduce our 3 panelists for this morning. The 4th panelist, Attorney Banks Mowley, unfortunately could not be with us this morning due to an unforeseen matter. So our first panelist is Quentin Holmes, Sr. Dr. Holmes is a native of Grambling, Louisiana. He earned both a Bachelor's of Arts and a Master's of Arts degree in criminal justice from the University of Louisiana at Monroe. Dr. Holmes earned his PhD in public administration from Jackson State University. Dr. Holmes' professional career began as a patrol officer for the Monroe Police Department. After receiving his commission to second lieutenant in the ROTC program at the University of Louisiana at Monroe, he pursued an active duty career in Europe with the United States Army Military Police Corps. After returning home from his military assignment, Dr. Holmes returned to the law enforcement profession and worked in various capacities that included community police officer, SWAT team member, violent crimes investigator, and administrative assistant to the chief of police. In 2011, Dr. Holmes became the first African American to be appointed chief of police of the Monroe Police Department. Dr. Holmes retired from the Monroe Police Department after more than 29 years of service in law enforcement. In August 2017, he joined the faculty at Grambling State University as an assistant professor in the Public Administration Department, where he currently teaches. Dr. Holmes is married to his college sweetheart, Janie, and the couple have 2 children. Dr. Holmes. Our next panelist is Kenya Moses. So panelist Moses is the Chief Operating Officer for Grambling State University. A Sterling, Louisiana native, she holds a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting from Grambling State University, Juris Doctorate degree from Loyola University School of Law, and a Master's of Law in Taxation from Villanova University School of Law. Panelist Moses is a former member of the Grambling Lady Tigers women's basketball team. In the legal arena, panelist Moses served in various roles with the State of Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services Bureau of General Counsel, as a prosecutor in the 1st and 3rd Judicial District Attorney's Office, as the former city attorney for the city of New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. In higher education, Attorney Moses has served as an adjunct professor at Nunez Community College, as well as an instructor in the Caddo Sheriff's Office Cadets Training Academy. Ms. Moses is an active member of the Louisiana Bar Association. She was named by Attorney General Jeff Landry to serve on his Civil Division Transition Committee. She is a Silver Star member of over 31 years in Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and is president of the Epsilon Psi Omega chapter. Panelist Moses was inducted into Grambling State University's Hall of Fame Gallery of Distinction for her noteworthy community service. Panelist Kenya Moses. Next is panelist Kevin Washington. So Dr. Washington is an Africana-centered psychologist licensed in Florida and Washington, D.C. He is a percussionist and priest of Amani Temple. He has taught, lectured at several colleges and universities, both at the national and international level. NBC Universal, National Alliance to End Homelessness, Roland Martin, Essence, and many other national and international organizations have sought his expertise on Black African psychology matters. Dr. Washington has worked closely with the Boris L. Hitson Foundation in addressing the mental health concerns of people of African descent. He is a past president of the Association of Black Psychologists and is currently an associate professor in the Sociology and Psychology Department at Grambling State University. He is the National Program Director of Black Marriage Day, President of Black Mental Health Matters, founder and CEO of Roots Africa, and founding board and vice president of the World Mental Health Coalition. As a Fulbright Hayes Scholar, Dr. Washington researched the impact of socializing institutions on the healing or restructuring of post-apartheid South Africa. He is the founder of Ubuntu Psychotherapy. As the founder, he advances a culturally sensitive modality for mental health counseling and psychotherapy for Black men and boys, as well as Black African families. Through his research and writing, Dr. Washington seeks to assist people to live life with power, purpose, and passion. These are our three distinguished panelists. I want to now recognize the students who will serve as questioners this morning. The first is Mr. Gene Wilson III. So Mr. Wilson is a member of the Earl Lester Cole Honors College, mass communication major from Dallas, Texas. Next is Ms. Bria Johnson. She's a member of the Earl Lester Cole Honors College, criminal justice major from Richmond, Virginia. Next is Mr. Tay Abraham. Mr. Abraham is a member of the Earl Lester Cole Honors College, a sociology major from Baldwin, Louisiana. So we have our distinguished panelists and our distinguished questioners.
At this time, we would ask that each panelist provide a brief statement as to your perspective of what the Constitution means to you as an American citizen.
Good morning again, everyone. And I definitely thank the organizers of this event for giving me the opportunity to serve on the council. What the Constitution means to me and the importance of it is that it sets a foundation for our rules of law. Of course, this country is based on that we try to keep things in order based on rules of law. And with the profession that I've worked in for so long, a lot of what we do is rooted in the Constitution and to make sure that we treat everyone equally. The Constitution, while it's not, and I'm aware it's not a perfect document, but our Constitution has been a very good document and the longest lasting Constitution of any country in the world. So when I review the Constitution, when I think about the Constitution and how it dictates what we do, it helps maintain law and order within our country. It's not always perfect, law and order, but it does give us a foundation. And the importance of the Constitution and what we do, and I know we'll discuss it later during the panel, is that we must be aware of what our voting power is and how we can make sure that our Constitution stays intact, that our Constitution, if amendments need to be made, they're made appropriately where everyone is included. So we need to keep that in mind, not only the U.S. Constitution, but the state Constitution, that it keep us grounded. So that's my perception of the Constitution, what it does for us, and we just really need to not take it for granted.
Good morning. For me, the United States Constitution sets forth a balance of government, considering that there is the executive branch, the legislative branch, as well as the judiciary branch of government. It formulates the foundation that we have to utilize to make sure there's a balance of power. And considering that there is a need to make sure that in that balance of power, that each branch of government is utilizing its own distinct role. For me, quite simply, is making sure that each role of government is being used to the fullest extent of the law, but making sure that each branch is doing what it's supposed to do based on its own separate duties and responsibilities. So it's making sure that the balance of government is going forward and making sure that everyone is doing what they're supposed to do. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. It is a privilege to be able to sit in this space and to be able to have this discussion with Grambling. I can recall being a student, attending these convocations and thinking about what am I here for, and hopefully I'm leaving something that is enlightening, and I'm inspired by this panel. I thank the organizers who put this together to inspire us to think deeply about the document called the Constitution. With anything that is created, you must examine the intent and its interest. If we look at the Constitution as it is written, it follows the heels of what was called the Declaration of Independence. A population of individuals that had been oppressed by the British created a text that suggested that they were indeed human. If you begin to examine the Constitution, you will see that the Constitution says it begins with we as identifying oneself as being human. It is amazing at some level how a document that proclaims the humanity of a population had to, at some time, begin to include a population to make them become human in a given society. So my question, my challenge to the Constitution is that from its beginning, who was considered to be people? Who were the people, who were the we that was being talked about? And we can clearly see that from the Declaration of Independence. Those who owned land were the ones that were human, and therefore they had the rights, and those who did not own land, only Englishmen could own land, therefore the idea of only Englishmen. So by default or extension, the idea of the Constitution as we, as it was written, was again about this idea of identity. The intent, it was to free a population to claim their particular interest, and the interest was to be able to expand themselves economically, independent of being oppressed by the British. So we have to be clear then that the intent was to proclaim the idea of humanity. Its interest was to expand itself in the territory economically and otherwise. And I'm enamored by the idea that there were three critical points to mention: the idea of the legislative branch and the judicial branch and the executive branch. There's also a serious concern about what should happen to the population that were enslaved. And so I hope that we can unpack some of that in this discussion, because we see that in the origination of the document, people of African descent were considered to be three-fifths of what we call the Great Compromise, which has to be discussed at some level about what does it mean to be three-fifths, right? How can one person be three-fifths of a human being? And yet at the same time, your document is about the proclamation of your humanity. So thank you.
What is the purpose of the United States Constitution?
As I kind of mentioned before in my opening comments, the purpose of the Constitution, ultimately, what I think the ultimate goal of the Constitution is to ensure that everyone is treated on a level playing field. As my distinguished colleague just mentioned, we do know, however, that when the Constitution was first crafted and written, it didn't consider minorities, specifically blacks, as on that same level playing field. When it was actually written, we weren't included. It wasn't written for us. It wasn't written for African Americans. It was written for the whites of the day. And of course, through later amendments, that's what brought us into the fold of being treated equally. So for me, the Constitution, the foundation root of it, is to make sure that we all afford the same equal rights. Again, as I mentioned, sometimes we don't think it's fairly interpreted by whether it's the Supreme Court or other local courts that have to interpret the Constitution, with the Supreme Court being the final arbiter of it. But that's the foundation of the Constitution. And how it ultimately looks long term, and as we will discuss later, I'm sure, is that amendments come into play to try to make it better and try to improve it. So my foundation is equality, is what the Constitution was designed for.
The question, what is the purpose of the Constitution? And I believe that that question has evolved over time. And when you look at the Constitution as to what its purpose is now versus how the Constitution was created and the basis behind the Constitution when it was drafted. Today, it's about due process, it's about equality, it's about having that foundation where we all have the rights and privileges that we can truly today benefit from, not being discriminated against. There's so many privileges and rights that we have now that 200 years ago, we as a people, we did not have. And so when you look at the Constitution as it is now and its purpose, it has evolved over time. And so I believe as a panel today, we're going to discuss some issues that will help you understand the Constitution in a deeper way. So you will take certain privileges and rights that you have now more seriously, because your ancestors lived, fought, died in some instances for you to have the rights that you have now. The Constitution, you now have the right to vote. 200 years ago, you did not have that right. Now you have the right, if you so choose, to say whatever you want to say. At one point, you did not have the freedom of speech. Now, you have the right to remain silent, because what you say may be held against you in a court of law. You have the right to the assistance of counsel. So there's so many different rights that the Constitution provides to you. And as you learn more about the Constitution, you will understand the benefits that so many of your ancestors basically provided to you that you can't take for granted.
The Constitution, what is about, what is it in a thing? What constitutes a thing? There's the preamble for the Constitution. There are the Bill of Rights that were alluded to about freedom of speech. There are 10 of those. There are 27 amendments in the Constitution. And it is a proclamation again of what it means to be a human being in this space, for a population that was dehumanized by its mother country. And so I would suggest then that everyone has the capacity to establish their own constitution. We'll talk about that later. But the issue is, what is it that we stand for? That's why it says we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, begins to set the stage for what this space will stand for, what it will tolerate, the laws of the land, which is why it's called the highest, the greatest statement and the highest law of the land, because it says this is who we are. And so I then honor the fact that the Constitution is about a proclamation of the population that was dehumanized by its previous oppressor.
As an American citizen, in your opinion, what protection does the United States Constitution provide for you?
Okay. We'll keep starting on this end. What protection does the United States Constitution provide for me is, and I'm going to tie this to a few of the key Bill of Rights, if you will, in one amendment from my practical experience in law enforcement, and that's dealing with the 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th, and the 14th Amendment. And those amendments deal with the fact of whether when you can be searched. You know, you have a right with the Fifth Amendment of due process. You have a right to a jury trial and speedy trial if you so choose. Sometimes what we tend to forget is that those first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, only apply on the federal level when we speak in the general terms. The 14th Amendment tied it to everyone with state level that they have to govern by the Constitution. So how does that affect me and you on a daily basis? And this is why I'm sure that we all echo and think how important the Constitution is, but it's a document that most of us take for granted, that it's going to exist forever. Because, say for example, in the 8th Amendment, that deals with cruel and unusual punishment, or the 4th that deals with search and seizure. Almost all of us, at some point, either know someone that has had a law enforcement contact, or you have been contacted by law enforcement. And the right of law enforcement to conduct a search on you, or to seize you, meaning arrest you, to stop you from going freely, all that rooted in the foundation of the Constitution. And having that foundation there dictates what law enforcement can and cannot do, when they can and cannot do it. So it affects us every single day within our lives. It affects me every single day within my life as we walk through this country. So the purpose of it is this, and this is where sometimes we miss the vote. When we get to the end, we're talking about voting. That while the Constitution sets the foundation of equal treatment, whether you're getting seized, whether you're getting searched, whether you have a trial, the voting part come into play because the people that interpret or the people that make the new laws that say, for example, when law enforcement can give a search. Well, that's dictated by the legislators at the state, local, and national level that we send to represent the legislative branches. And so when we look at these different aspects of the Constitution, the purpose of it, I know the importance is to make sure that I'm treated equally and fairly, just like everyone else is in this country, and that I can't be mistreated. So that's the purpose of how it affects me on a daily basis. It's something, obviously, that I'm more in tune with, having worked in the profession for 29 years. But that's the key component that I always emphasize in terms of what the Constitution does for us, what it does for me individually, and that we should keep it focused on.
I believe the question asked from my perspective as to how the Constitution benefits me directly as a citizen. And just as one of the panelists Dr. Washington, I believe he stated at the beginning of his statement about we the people. And I believe the reminder is known that we the people, you are the people. It's about you as an individual. The Constitution gives you the ability to have individual rights that benefit you. So when we talk about the people or individuals are holding you back, you have the ability to vote and put individuals in office that can make a difference for every decision that you make. If you're not happy with the law, you can change the law. If you're not happy with your legislatures or your mayors or your city council members or your law enforcement, it all starts with the Constitution because you have the ability to vote to change laws. And you need to be able to understand the Constitution because as a citizen, you have privileges and rights that are available to you because of the Constitution. So as a citizen, you want to exercise and understand those rights in order to make changes. There is not a law that is in place that cannot be changed. It cannot be amended. It cannot be ratified. And it all starts with the Constitution.
What it means to me is it shows me what happens when a people can proclaim themselves to be human. Every aspect of the Bill of Rights is a statement against, at some level, the British Empire. If you look at the Fourth Amendment about the right to bear arms, it was because the British had taken away the citizens or the occupants of this land to bear arms. There's an amendment that speaks to not being searched in season, that you mentioned, because the British were going around appalling, disregarding the humanity of those that inhabited this space. And so we see that in the Bill of Rights, it is a proclamation of humanity against those that were oppressing them. That is why we have the Boston Tea Party and all those things. So it speaks in volumes to what it means for a population to say that this is who I am, this is who I will be, this is how I'll be respected on the face of the planet. So I admire individuals to be able to stand and say, this is what I'm about. And you mentioned earlier about my ancestors who fought and died. The issue, for instance, we talked about the issue of fighting for the right to vote. The issue really for me is that if voting is about citizenship, and we'll talk about this later, and citizenship is about humanity, then in reality, the death of ancestors was not about voting rights, but about being acknowledged as a human being, just as the founding members of this country created a document called the Constitution, to be recognized as being human. So it reminds me of what it means to take a stand, to recognize yourself as being human, to be respected as such. That is the Constitution, what it means to me.
What to the slave is the 4th of July? In other words, what is the date, what is the important date of the 4th of July, and how is the date important to you?
The question asks, it's a two-part from that we were asked. One, what does the 4th of July mean to the slave? And then the last part is asked, and I'm going to respond also to what it means today. I think that when we look at the time of Independence Day and what it meant to a slave, and when you read some of the writing by Frederick Douglass and others during that time period, Independence Day wasn't for the slaves. You know, Independence Day represented during that time freedom, independence from British rule, being able to have the country to do the things that we need to do here in the United States, to grow as a country, to develop and set our own course and set our own path. But in doing so, that did not include the slaves because they were still in bondage. They still had slave masters. There was plenty of rights that they didn't have, like being able to vote, being able to own property, and just a number of things. So to a slave, I'm sure there was no celebration, because I can imagine that on Independence Day, when they watched the major feasts and festivals that were going on with the white citizenry, they were still in bondage, had to work, the field or do other tasks, and there was no joy or freedom for them. So Independence Day to them, I think it was just another day. It was just another day of work. It was nothing for them to get up and celebrate. Now, of course, through the course of time, and as Dr. Moses mentioned, with the different amendments and with the different changes and things of this nature, we as a country now recognize Independence Day because we accept the fact that the country was set free, so to speak, or declared the independence from British rule. And because we are American citizens, is that we are part of that, regardless of the fact that it didn't include us initially. So now I think it's an important day for us to acknowledge, but I think it's equally important to understand that at its inception, we weren't included. And that should motivate us more that because we became included, there are other things that we need to address, just like our ancestors fought for our independence from slavery, fought for our right to vote, fought for our right to be equal. We need to continue that fight and the challenges and issues that we have today.
Was it, Dr. Moon?
So when we look at Frederick Douglass and the statement in 1852 that he made to what is the 4th of July to the slaves, he was actually responding to we the people. And he was saying that the document at some level speaks to freedom. This is what I'm saying here, but it did not apply to everyone. And so he says that while we were out there cutting the capers, it's a very powerful speech that everyone should read. You should read. Everyone in this room should read what to the slave is the 4th of July. You will see something in that that is very powerful. He challenges the system. And the system, he says that you wrote a document that is eloquent, speaks to liberty and freedom. However, people like me did not enjoy freedom on that day. So why should I be out here engaging in this process of 4th of July? He was saying that we have been denied as people of African descent the right of humanity. And this is exactly what Douglass was speaking of. And you have to understand how he was conceptualizing this reality. Here's a man who learned to read upside down. Here's a man whose wife, I think the narrative is very beautiful about how he gained his freedom from his wife selling furniture because she was a free woman in the northern region. And the love that she had for him was so deep, and the passion that he had for humanity was so profound that she found a way to buy his freedom. Right? That speaks to the power of love relationship. And she supported him and elevated his voice to become the great emancipator, to talk about emancipation. And so he wrote this eloquent speech that says, what does it mean to me and my ancestors, this 4th of July that you celebrate from your oppressors, when you have continued to oppress people like me and those around me in this day? So I think then that when we hear about Frederick Douglass in his statement, it is important to read that narrative as well. And we will learn a lot about, again, to interrogate a structure, a system, and not to accept it. I think that Malcolm X said it very clearly that because they are kittens in the oven, it doesn't make them biscuits. Meaning that because you have someone in a given space, doesn't mean that they're included in that space in totality. And Frederick Douglass challenged that by saying that I'm here in America, but I'm not an American citizen, so I haven't been treated as such. And I found that to be very powerful.
What were black codes?
Black codes. Okay. Black codes and later Jim Crow law. And to be brief in my comments, I'm just going to kind of explain what those two terms mean in general sense, but then I'm going to spend the balance of my time talking about a modern day, if you will, black codes or Jim Crow law. Black code is with Jim Crow law, were laws that were put in place to make it harder for freed slaves at this point to enjoy the same equal protection of the Constitution as we've been talking about the past 20 or 30 minutes. It criminalized some things so that when people get arrested, they couldn't vote. And that criminalization was geared more toward African Americans during the time. So that's what those laws was. I'll speak general about those two terms because they may be coming in later. But I do want to give an example that I actually just spoke to students about a modern day sense of black code, for the lack of a better phrase. It's the laws that are passed today, and I happen to be in my former capacity as chief, asked about a new law that the city of Monroe wanted to put on the books because other cities in the state were doing it. And that was a law against sagging, sagging your pants. Now, personally, I don't like it. I hate to see it. I think it's inappropriate for a young man to do, but at the same time, I understand that this is a free country, and we have to, live and be part of our law. So when I was asked about should the city of Monroe pass a sagging law, therefore law enforcement can enforce that sagging law, whether it's arrest or summons or other things, basically criminalizing. My comment was no, absolutely not, because number one of the equality of it, and I think just the fairness of it, try to make that a criminal crime. But most important, this is what I spent my time commenting on to the council, was that having a law like that on the books is going to target African American young men. It's going to promote and encourage discrimination of that law by law enforcement for young men. What would be considered sagging? 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inches, or what would it be? And you leave that up to an officer to make in his or her discretion. But what I saw long term, what that would have done, is that a lot of black and brown people would have been arrested at a much unequal rate than their white counterparts for sagging. And what that would do is some jobs you would now be eliminated from because you have a criminal record. They'll just throw your application to the file. What impact would it do for you and your family if they can't afford to pay that $500,000 what that fine would be? So my best analogy is, and this all stems to and get back to the ultimate purpose, I think, over here today is to encourage the voting process, is that we need to make sure we got the right people in places to actually speak out against those things so that they don't get passed. Now, the city of Monroe didn't pass it. I think in large part due to my aggressive speech against it. But there are communities within this state that do have the law on the books. And when I think about that type of law, and others, vacancy and things of this nature, while they don't call it black codes today or Jim Crow today, it has the same effect as black codes and Jim Crow laws.
So Black Code laws basically was any laws that were written to restrict blacks from having the ability to vote or to work. And even today, we have similar laws, and Dr. Holmes mentioned like those laws that suggest racial profiling. But you will also see it when it comes to equality with women in the workforce. There are certain laws that you will notice that there is not equality across the board. And you have to pay attention because it's very subtle. And even now in 2022, we have to pay attention to how laws are written because they are designed by some legislatures to prohibit African Americans from advancing in the justice system, from schools being opened in certain districts, from individuals having a certain number of congressmen or senators in certain populations. There's so many different things that can be written in a way to limit the number of individuals to even live in a certain neighborhood. And so these restrictions have been put in place, very subtle, very quiet, to prohibit the advancement of individuals to move forward. And that's the Black Code. You just have to pay attention and you have to read. And I know as a panel, some of the restrictions, even years ago, if you didn't know how to read, that was a problem. And that was part of the issues that we as Blacks had to address because we did not know how to read. We were slaves. And so we were challenged even when it was time to vote because we didn't know how to read. And so if you didn't know how to read, you were prohibited from voting. There are restrictions that were put in place to keep us behind. Instead, we now want to move forward. That was all part of the Black Code.
I was thinking about the Black codes. There were, as Dr. Holmes mentioned, there were two sets. There was the Black codes and there were the Jim Crow laws. There were two sets of Black codes. There was a first set of Black codes that actually was enacted before the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, before they ended the enslavement. For example, in the state of Oregon, even though it was not a slave state, if there was, it said, no Negro or mulatto shall cross the state lines and be in this state, and if they are, they can be shot and killed on sight. So you have various states that were not necessarily they were not slave states, but they actually had these Black codes. The second set of Black codes come about as a result of granting a population a certain set of rights. And so to rebuff that, to fight against it, we have the 65 conversation about the Black codes. And so these Black codes then had the same type of coloration as we see in slavery. For example, it said that anyone working, any Black person working in this state must have a contract and must refer to the person that they're working with as master as they are to be worker. So you have the same dogmatic response. So Black codes actually simply extended the entire process of enslavement for this particular country. So we say then that people have been free since 1962, 63, 65, whatever number you want to use. The reality is that the Black codes extended it, and then on the backside of that, you had the Jim Crow laws that had some of the same effects. For example, in Ruston, while I was living here in the 80s, a law was put on the books that suggested that even though the Bill of Rights said that we have the right to assemble, the law in Ruston said that no three Black men shall gather in one place and have a conversation. The idea is that was a form of Black code law, and that was in the 80s. It's not like it was a long time ago, right? So we have to be clear that this extension of and some talk about the right supremacist ideology has been in effect in terms of the Constitution said one thing, how it was vetted out against the population was something else. And so we have to understand that there were two sets of Black codes and also the Jim Crow laws. And Dr. Holmes, I love what you said about the continuing effects of such, right? And so those things continue to happen. If we say that Blacks are 12% of the U.S. population, then a fundamental question then becomes, how is it that over 67% of the population in prison, incarcerated, are African American, right? Or non-white. So we know then that enslavement in this country had ended with the 14th Amendment. However, it said with the exception of being found guilty or punishable by a crime. We know that at the end of enslavement in this country, that there was immediately P forms that were opened up where they were falsely accusing Black men especially of certain crimes, as we see the same thing happen today of falsely or creating a condition of which y'all do understand that the trap is a trap, right? So you can't get out of the trap, right? So from the trap house and trap music, the idea is that create a condition of which populations engage in selling contraband and other things, traps them and creates another force of enslavement in this country. So we have to be clear that again, I would say that the same dogmatic response, same harsh different color. That we have to be clear that Jim Crow laws still have some effect today.
Beginning in alphabetical order, with each panelist providing 2 to 3 minute closing statement about the United States Constitution in your own words, leave a thought-provoking statement with our students, faculty, and staff.
My thoughts is this, and don't take this as my being arrogant or rude to you. But what I want you to remember, and from me and my perspective, if you don't vote, you shouldn't complain. If you don't vote, you shouldn't complain. And when I'm talking about voting, I'm not just talking about voting in the presidential election, which that's when most of us turn out. The most important rules and laws and things get done at the local level or even the university level. I'm going to give you a few examples. A lot of students will complain about what happens here on campus, or why do we have this concert coming, or why did SJ do this, or Grad Student Association did that. But yet, you didn't take time to vote on the way to represent you the way that you wanted to, but you complain about everything. You shouldn't vote. If you don't vote, you shouldn't complain. Or you go back to your community and you don't understand why did they pass a SAG law? Why did they pass a law that if you record police, we can take your cell phone? Well, because there were leaders that was there to prove that. But if you didn't vote in your local election, you shouldn't complain. And you can go all the way up to the state level. You can go all the way up to the federal level, from school boards, from police chiefs, who serve in the city council. At the end of the day, if you don't vote, you shouldn't be complaining. You should accept things as they are and make the best of it. Now, what I encourage you to do is to exercise your power to vote, because people died for us to get that right. And it doesn't matter how big or small the election is, you should vote, because then you can legitimately complain if your representative or whoever wins that seat is not doing things that is fair and equal. You have a solid moral conscience that you could complain and do it in good conscience. So please vote. And when you go vote, take someone with you. If we can do that, if we can start voting in the capacity that we should, but every election comes around, and we've all heard this, everybody wants the black vote. So if we vote, just think in the number and percentage that we should be voting, just think of what we can do and what we can change to make sure that our rights are protected as well, and that we can truly be represented, as Dr. Watson mentioned, as we the people. We can become part of we the people and not just taking whatever comes along our way. So please vote or don't complain. Thank you for your attention.
I would like to leave you with a reminder that you have a purpose. I remember when I met, and I'm going to say Senator Barack Obama, because at the time when I met him, it was before he became President Barack Obama. He had just finished his speech in July of 2004 at the Democratic National Convention, and it was after I had been appointed city attorney of the city of New Orleans in 2005 when I met him. And I remember when I shook his hand, acknowledging greatness. And so I want to remind you about the fact that you have purpose. Don't miss your opportunity to fulfill your purpose and destiny as you move forward in what you've heard today about the Constitution. Why is it important? Simply put, because at the time, Senator Barack Obama, he became the 5th United States Senator, African American Senator, before he became president. That's very important. And when you learn more about the Constitution and you learn about just the accomplishments of African Americans throughout history, 5 African American United States senators in all of history. That's important. Don't miss your moment to fulfill your purpose. That's my thought-provoking closing statement.
The Constitution reminds me that everyone in this room has the capacity to establish for themselves what they will stand for, how they will stand, and recognize the sources of whom they arrest them. We must recognize that when we talk about the Constitution, that we're talking about a proclamation of humanity. We must recognize clearly that there is a continuation of a legacy of greatness. When we talk about voting, we have to be clear on not only the issue of the right to vote, but the fundamental question is voting for what? For who? It was not until I went to South Africa and I saw a ballot. And this ballot had on it every possibility of a population, from the anti-white to the anti-black population, Indian, everybody, Christian, had every possible candidate on the ballot to represent every ideology possible. And they came to this country and asked me a question. They said, well, who do you vote for? Who do you all vote for? And I could understand the question because we were choosing between 2 white males or whatever the election was. They couldn't understand where was our choice in the entire process. We were forced to make a decision, but after we really listened to the process. So they challenged us to think deeply about what are we really voting for. We have to stop being, in our community, a cheap date. We have to stop being a cheap date to politicians who show up to our churches and they come out and they date us and they treat us well, and as soon as they get what they want from us, we don't see them again until the next election. We have to stop that particular behavior and determine for ourselves what is our true agenda. What is it that we really stand for? What is it that we really decide? What do we need if we are a part of the Louisiana system of schools? Why are the amenities in this space distinct from other schools in the system? It's not a function of people, it's a function of distribution of wealth in a population. So we should be able to demand certain things. If we say that for the country, can we not demand these particular rights? But we treat ourselves like a cheap date. We're glad that somebody comes out, they listen, they check us out, and I'm trying to keep it clean as possible, y'all. I'm working hard to keep it clean. But we are enamored with that, but we do not put demands on them. When we talk about the wink and nod politics, we had Dr. King dealing with Johnson talking about civil rights, and it was a wink and nod process. As a matter of fact, Johnson said that even though King came into the office, he says, you know, I'm not doing anything he just said, which means that he smiled in his face, but did not intend to do the behavior of granting the proper right. So we have to, not only the idea of voting, and I will submit to you that my ancestors did not die for the right to vote. I will stand on that particular hill. They died for the right to be human. And every single day that we walk around here being N's, the N-word, the B-word, and the H-word, we're not being human because those are not human entities. They died for that right, and voting is an extension of your humanity. The fundamental question becomes, when are you going to be human and not be treated as subhuman, and not be a cheap thing to somebody else? Thank you so much.
I would like to thank the panelists for providing such insightful comments and for helping us to think of the Constitution in a more deep manner. Let's give them another round of applause. And I'd like to thank all the individuals that were programmed today. And I'd like to thank Delta Iota chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated for serving as ushers. And words of appreciation to the Office of Continuing Education and Service Learning and the Earl Lester Cole Honors College for sponsoring this wonderful event. Last but not least, I thank you, the audience. You contributed questions and were engaged listeners. This program would not have been a success if it was not for you and if you had not been present and contributed. Give yourself a round of applause. And with that, that concludes our Constitution Day observance. Classes will resume at 1 o'clock.